Ler ti mynd medda'r jydod robin, ler ti mynd medda dibyn as dobin, ler ti mynd medda John, ler ti mynd medda'r never beyond. Mynd ti ar cod medda'r jydod robin, mynd ti ar cod medda dibyn as dobin, mynd ti ar cod medda John, mynd ti ar cod medda'r never beyond. Benedi yno medda'r jydod robin, benedi yno medda dibyn as dobin, benedi yno medda John, benedi yno medda'r never beyond.
Welcome back, listeners, to episode 3, The Forgotten Isle. Another step in our shared quest through Welsh history, legend, and the echoes of an ancient land. Today, we began with that haunting, yet beautiful and old Welsh song, Hela I Dlw, or Hunting the Wren, which calls to a time of ceremonial ritual, often sung in the winter months, as the wren, in Druidic pagan culture, often represented the death of the old year and the rebirth of the new. How very apt, don't you think? I will play the song in full at the end of the episode, with all the translation will all be in the notes below, so please have a listen and enjoy. But this isn't just a melody, it's not just a song or a nice tune. It's a bridge to the past, a song that carries the whispers of old Cymru across time to those who are willing to listen. One line in particular lingers in the air. Blirit tinnen mynd medir, never beyond. Where are you going? Said the never beyond. This question, asked by a presence that feels both eternal and elusive, speaks to the heart of our quest. The never beyond seems to suggest a spirit that exists outside the bounds of time, calling to us from across the centuries, asking us to consider where we are headed and why. For me, it's a line that feels as old as the hills of Wales, as if it were the land itself, asking us to remember our connection to it, challenging us to listen and understand. For some of us, these words stir something profound, as though a part of us remembers this call, this question. And perhaps if you too felt that spark, a chill, thrill in your soul, perhaps you too carry the blood of a dragon within, a spirit connected to Cymru, with an ancient lineage reaching back to the time of myths and magic. So, let us set forth, guided by the haunting melody of Hunting the Wren, as we begin episode 3, The Forgotten Isle. Together, we dive into the mysteries of a land that was old before history was written, seeking out the stories that connect us to our past and each other. Let us begin.
are a people ready to fight, but not for empire or wealth, only for their native soil and their liberty. A scattered and independent race, they are fierce in their resistance to foreign rule. And though divided by geography and clan, they share a common spirit of defiance against invaders. Their greatest strength lies not in numbers or in wealth, but in their unshaken resolve to remain free. Tacitus, Agricola, Anno Domini 98.
Okay, so welcome back to Where Dragons Sleep, a Welsh Quest. I'm your host, Hunter W. Jones, and today we take an extraordinary step back in time, far beyond the days of kings and castles, before our island even had a name, before Wales, before Cymru, before them all. We journeyed to a time when the entire island we now call Britain was a place of mystery, magic, and untamed wilderness. A time when the ancestors of modern-day Wales roamed the land, governed by their own laws, ruled by nature, and guided by gods and spirits, and perhaps sleeping dragons in the mountains. This is a story of deep roots, big trees, ancient myths, and the forgotten world that shaped what we now call Cymru, Wales. In this episode, we will explore what life would have been like for the earliest inhabitants of the British Isles, their connection to their land, their spirituality, and how their stories and language evolved into what we know today are the myths, the memories of our forgotten identity. We embrace some of the legends, removing the Disney-fied effect to discover the true tales of fairies, castles, giants, and magic. The real magic that courses through the veins of every true son and daughter of Albion. Can the blood of Boudica, Arthur, Merlin, Glyndor be tapped and flow through legends of mighty warriors, ancient gods, and magical realms? This is not Narnia or Middle-earth. This is not Westeros. This is not Disney. This is my land. This is our land. This is our lost, stolen identity that we must ignite with the flame of dragon. Then, as our true quest continues in part 4 of today's episode, we will return to the modern search for the dragon bloodline, the living descendant of the true Welsh king. Could his descendants still be walking among us, and are we getting closer to uncovering their true identity? I have received some developments that I trust you find as intriguing as me. Perhaps, little by little, our quest gets a little closer, but we both enjoy the legends, the stories, as we continue through this adventure. So let us begin our journey back to the dawn of the Magic Isle. But if you can forgive me for a moment, before we really get into the meat of this episode, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to everyone who recently has reached out and shown your support. And, clearly there is a lot of people that are interested in this quest and appreciate the work that goes into it. I'm not monetized. I don't have any sponsorship or support or financial support. So just by listening to this, you are already helping me continue this journey. If, however, you do enjoy the episodes and you would like me to continue, please head over to the Patreon. And there you will see there are a few options. There's, of course, a free membership as well. So I'm not asking for money, although that would be greatly appreciated to continue this journey. And if at all you don't wish to do the Patreon, again, just by following the Instagram, I'm setting up a YouTube as well. Within the memberships, I hope to go deeper into the legends and the myths and the magic. I will be reading with my best accents to try to convey the true beauty and mystery and magic of the old tales. I'll also be offering deep exclusive merchandise. I've got some fantastic dragon-inspired merchandise coming out soon. So yeah, please, thank you so much for listening to this and supporting me during this journey. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you. Part 1. The Ancient Isle of Briton. Before Caesar. Before the Romans, before the Normans, before the Vikings, there was a land we call Albion. A land of dense forest, endless hills, and winding rivers. At this time, the island we now call as Britain was a patchwork of wild landscapes, untouched by the empire's hands. It was a place ruled by nature, where humans lived according to the rhythms of the earth and the sky. Life was both harsh and sacred, and people believed that the gods themselves walked among them. The people of this ancient land, the Britons, were not yet bound by the borders and names that would later divide their island. They lived within the natural world, where survival was intertwined with the sacred. Tacitus, the Roman historian, described them as
a people scattered and free, their loyalty held only to their land, their hearts stirred by the unyielding desire to remain unbroken. Agricola.
Scholars today emphasize the Britons' deep relationship with their environment, a reverence for the earth as both a resource and a source of divine power. As noted by historian Barry Cunliffe in his work Britain Begins, the ancient Britons
saw themselves as custodians of the land, not its masters. They sought to align themselves with the forces of nature rather than to dominate them.
The forests, mountains, and rivers were imbued with spiritual significance, often seen as the dwelling places, gods and spirits. Forests, in particular, held a unique power in the mind of the Britons. The oak tree, long a symbol of strength and endurance, was believed to be sacred to the Druids, the spiritual leaders of the Celts. As noted in Miranda Green's study on the Druids, trees, especially oaks, were revered as intermediaries, sorry, I can't say that, between the heaven and the earth, their roots reaching into the underworld, while their branches touched the sky. From the book The World of the Druids, written in 1997. To fell an oak was to cut down a conduit between the human world and the divine, an act reserved only for the most sacred of rituals. The natural elements, fire, water, earth, and air, were seen as manifestations of the gods. The River Severn, or Hafren, was believed to be a powerful goddess who shaped the land and provided for its people. The mountains, like Snowdon, in what would become Wales, were seen as the homes of the gods and mythical beings, and dragons in particular, standing as silent guardians over the human world. These connections between land and spirit were central to the Britons' worldview, as noted in Mark Williams's journal article Myth and Meaning in the Early British Isles, written in 2015. He says,
"The Britons did not separate the sacred from the everyday. Their gods walked among them in the form of natural phenomena, storms, rivers, trees, and the landscape itself was a living, breathing entity."
This connection to the land was not only spiritual, but practical. The cycles of the sun and moon dictated when crops were sown and harvested, while the changing season marked the passage of time and turn of fortune. Tacitus's observations of these ancient peoples reinforce their fierce independence and deep connection to their world. He writes that they
knew no master but nature, and no law but that of the earth itself.
Reflecting the Britons' rejection of Roman rule and the foreign concept of empire. Their loyalty was not to kings or emperors, but to the land that sustained them. Whatever your opinion might be, you must agree that this love of land is a lost ideology, as we are now ruled by blue light, Netflix, and processed meats. How wild, horrific, and beautiful it must have been to only have the land to connect us. This bond with nature is reflected in their myths. Bran, the Blessed, the giant king of Britain, in the Mabinogion, symbolized the strength and endurance of the land itself. His story, like many others from this period, emphasizes the inseparability of ruler and realm. As Ddraig Goch notes in his analysis of Celtic myth,
"The land and its ruler were one. To harm the king was to harm the land, and to harm the land was to weaken the people. The king was not a master, but a servant to the earth and its cycles."
Written in the book Celtic Myths and Legends, 2007. In this ancient world, time moved differently. There were no written histories, no chronicles of conquest. Knowledge was passed orally, carried in the poetry of bards and the stories of druids. As Anne Ross observes, the Celts' reliance on oral tradition ensured that their history and mythology were interwoven, forming a rich tapestry where myth often served as a guide to everyday life, and the past was a living part of the present, written in the book Pagan Celtic Britain. In these stories, the landscape was always a character, active and alive, shaping the fate of its people. So, before the arrival of the Romans, before Albion became Britain, the people of this island lived in harmony with the land, drawing strength from its power and living in reverence to its mysteries. Theirs was a world where the gods were never far away, and where the boundaries between the mortal and divine were blurred. In the hills, rivers, and forests of this ancient world, the Britons carved out a life that would leave a lasting imprint on the land and on the history of our beloved isle. Part 2. The people of Albion, the Britons. So, these early people were the Britons, the ancestors of today's Welsh, Scots, and Cornish. They spoke Brythonic, a Celtic language that is the precursor to modern Welsh, Cornish, and Breton. Their world was organized into tribal communities, each ruled by its own chief or king, forming a decentralized yet interconnected society. Life was inherently communal. Tribes lived close to the land, dependent on both the bounty of nature and the strength of their social bonds for survival. The early Britons were not only warriors, but also farmers, deeply tied to the cycles of the seasons. Their lives dictated by the rhythms of the earth and the sky. In the early days of Albion, the Britons were masters of their environment. They did not live in cities or stone fortresses like their Roman adversaries, but in hill forts and villages scattered across the landscape. These settlements were often strategically placed atop hills, providing both defense and a commanding view of the surrounding countryside. As noted again by Barry Cunliffe in Iron Age Communities in Britain,
the typical hill fort was not just a defensive structure, but the center of political and social life, a symbol of power and unity for the tribes who inhabited them.
Their homes were built to harmonize with the natural world. The roundhouse, the primary form of dwelling for the Britons, was a simple yet robust structure made of wood and woven branches, covered with thatch or turf. These circular homes, with a central hearth at their heart, represented more than just shelter. They were spiritual spaces as well, designed to mirror the cyclical nature of life, birth, death, and rebirth, fundamental concepts in Celtic belief. Inside the warmth of the fire symbolized both physical sustenance and the eternal flame of life. And it was around this fire that the tribe would gather to share meals, stories, and wisdom. The Britons were primarily agrarian, relying on the earth's fertility for survival. They cultivated grains like barley, wheat, and oats, which were essential staples in their diet, and they raised livestock, including cattle, sheep, and pigs. Their relationship with the land was both practical and spiritual. Fields were tilled not just for crops, but in alignment with the phases of the moon, the turning of the seasons. and the festivals that honoured the gods of fertility and harvest. As noted in Anne Ross's Pagan Celtic Britain, the cycles of ploughing, sowing, and harvesting were intricately tied to religious rituals, and the Druids played a key role in ensuring that these practices remained in harmony with the divine forces believed to control the land. Farming tools were crafted from wood, bone, and iron, the latter being a relatively new innovation that transformed agricultural efficiency. The Iron Age, beginning around 800 BC, brought with it tools like the ploughshare, which allowed the Britons to cultivate more land and produce greater yield. According to Cunliffe, the introduction of iron not only revolutionized warfare, but also agriculture, making it possible to sustain larger populations and more complex social structures. Women in ancient Britain played a significant role in both the domestic and public spheres. They were often in charge of managing the household, preparing food, weaving textiles, and raising children. But they were also involved in agriculture and, on occasion, warfare. Women could inherit property and wield considerable influence in tribal politics. In some cases, they even held leadership roles, as exemplified by the legendary figures and one of my favorite, Boudica, the warrior queen of the Iceni tribe, who led a major revolt against Roman occupation, and one that probably deserves her very own episode, if not an entire season. As Miranda Green notes in Celtic Goddesses, Warriors, Virgins, and Mothers, Celtic women, both mortal and divine, occupied a unique space in the cultural imagination. They could be life givers and nurturers, but they could also be warriors, leaders, and symbols of tribal sovereignty. This duality in the role of women is reflected in many of the myths and legends passed down through oral tradition. I will indeed have an episode just dedicated to women in Celtic beliefs. While the Britons were farmers, they were also fierce warriors. Each tribe had its own warriors, trained in the use of spears, swords, and shields, ready to defend their land against rival tribes or external threats, the White Dragon perhaps. War was an ever-present possibility, and to the Britons, it was not just about territorial expansion, but about honor, survival, and the protection of their homeland. Our favorite Roman historian, who's often mentioned, Tacitus, in his Agricola, remarked on the Britons' skill and tenacity in battle, observing, "They fight for their freedom, driven by the belief that their land is not to be conquered, but defended as if it were a living entity, a mother who has nurtured them." Such beautiful words really conveys and describes what these people must have been like. I love this idea of the land being our nurturing mother and must be treated as a living entity. How our planet would be so different today if we all held the same belief as our ancestors. Perhaps this is why the dragon remains sleeping. It's a nice thought. In their warrior culture, feasting and battle were deeply intertwined. After a day of farming or fighting, Briton warriors would gather in the chieftain's hall for a feast, where mead and ale flowed freely, and stories of great deeds were recounted by the bards, the keepers of history and tradition. These feasts were not just celebrations, but rituals that reinforced the tribe's unity and identity. The bardic tradition, as noted in John Koch's The Celtic Heroic Age, played a crucial role in maintaining tribal cohesion, as it was the bard's duty to immortalize the deeds of warriors in song, ensuring that the tribe's past lived on in collective memory. I often think about all the stories that we have potentially lost over time because of the oral tradition. The Britons were deeply spiritual, with a worldview that saw no separation between the natural and the supernatural worlds. The Druids, who were both priests and advisors to the tribal chieftains, guided the spiritual life of the tribe. They were believed to have the power to interpret the will of the gods through divination, especially by reading signs in nature, whether in the patterns of bird flight, the rustling of leaves, or the behavior of animals. As Stuart Pigott observes in The Druids, written in 1975, he says, "Druidic belief was centered on the idea that all living things, humans, animals, plants, were part of a great interconnected web of life, with the gods and ancestors constantly influencing the present. Their rituals sought to maintain the delicate balance between those worlds. This connection with the land was not merely spiritual, it was embedded in the very fabric of their daily lives." Hunting was another crucial aspect of life in early Britain. The forests were not just places of mystical significance. They provided essential resources like wild game, herbs, and materials for tools and shelter. Wild boar, deer, and hares were commonly hunted, and their flesh provided valuable protein, while their bones were used for tools and decoration. For the Britons, the act of hunting was often seen as a sacred duty, with many tribes holding ceremonies before and after the hunt to honor the forest gods and ensure that the balance of nature was maintained. This is not the Legolas wood elves of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. This was us. This was who we were. The changing seasons dictated the rhythm of life for the Britons. Each season brought its own challenges and opportunities. Spring was for sowing crops, summer for harvesting, autumn for preparing for winter, and winter for huddling together and surviving the cold months. The solstices and equinoxes were marked by festivals, most notably Beltane in the spring and Samhain in the autumn, which celebrated the cycle of life and death, the turning of the year, and the hope for renewal. These festivals were not only celebrated, but times for spiritual cleansing and preparation for the future. Samhain, which later evolved into Halloween, and so at the time of recording this, it is Halloween, so happy Samhain, everyone, marked the end of the harvest and the beginning of the dark half of the year. During this time, it was believed that the veil between the worlds of the living and the dead was at its thinnest, and offerings were made to the ancestors to ensure their protection through the long winter months. So you have to imagine life was like back then. You know, it must have been dark and perhaps spooky. Much of this deep connection to the land, the communal way of life, and the spiritual reverence for nature still resonates in modern Wales. The importance of community, a connection to one's heritage, and the resilience of the Welsh identity continue to draw from these beautiful ancient roots. As noted by Geraint Jenkins in A Concise History of Wales, written in 2007, he says, "The ancient Celtic worldview, shaped by the land, by community, and by a profound sense of connection to the past, has remained a cornerstone of Welsh identity, even as the country has evolved through the centuries." For these people, the land was not just a place to live, it was sacred. Every hill, river, and forest was believed to be inhabited by spirits, and the people would make offerings to ensure the favour of these spirits. Oak trees, as mentioned, were revered as symbols of strength and wisdom, and it was believed that the gods themselves sometimes took the form of animals, guiding hunters through the forests or warning them of danger. Rivers were seen as the lifeblood of the land, providing not just water but spiritual sustenance. The River Severn, known as Hafren, was incredibly sacred, and many believed it was the home of a powerful goddess who protected those who lived near its banks. And within the Patreon, I will be reading in more detail the legends and the myths of these goddesses and gods. So we will do a much deeper dive over there. So please check it out. Shameless plug. When we consider modern Wales with its dramatic landscapes of rolling hills, ancient forests, and jagged mountains, we can feel the same deep connection to the land that the early Britons held sacred. Places like Snowdonia, with its towering peaks and mist-covered valleys, are more than just landmarks. Go now, if you haven't been or seen Snowdonia, go now to Google and do an image search so that you will understand the majesty, the magic that I'm talking about. You can almost taste it on your lips, and you can maybe get a sense that here is where the dragons sleep, which is obviously what I'm inspired by here. So these landmarks, they are living symbols of the past, reminders that the earth itself holds the stories, the memories of those who came before. The spirit of places like Pen y Fan, the highest peak in southern Britain, remains intertwined with the myths of gods and heroes, as it was for ancient tribes who once worshipped at its base. Even today, the Welsh people carry the reverence for the land in their hearts, whether they know it or not. The land is not just where they live, it is a part of who they are. The sacred island of Ynys Môn, or now known as Anglesey, once the seat of Druidic power, is still a place of quiet reflection and awe, where visitors can feel the weight of history in every stone and tree. It was on this island that the Druids performed their most sacred rituals, and though the Romans sought to extinguish their influence, the spirit of Ynys Môn persists, just as the connection to nature continues to flow through Welsh culture. In many ways, the landscapes of Wales act as custodians of memory. I love that idea, that the mountains hold our beliefs, our stories, our legends, our heroes, our memories, preserving the rituals of the early Britons. When we walk these ancient paths, we are not just treading on soil, we are stepping through time, moving in the footsteps of those who lived with the knowledge that every river, every mountain, every forest held the presence of gods and spirits. This ancient awareness is still alive today, and I mean to make it more. I want everyone to know this. This is the whole point of this podcast, to awaken the sleeping dragons. Wales holds on to its traditions, its language, and its identity, always looking back to the land that shaped its people. The Britons of old may be long gone, but their connection to the natural world has never faded. It continues to thrive in the hearts of the Welsh people, passed down through generations, in the songs of the bards, in the stories of the Mabinogion, the unbroken chain of memory that ties the present to the past. To look upon the land of Wales today is to see the echoes of those who revered it long before us, a living testament to the enduring bond between the Welsh people and the land that has always been their home. And it is my job to perhaps remind some where they come from and where we are going. Okay, so that brings us to where Caesar now first sees our sacred isle. So before we get into part 3, Caesar's first glimpse of Britain, I'll just take a quick break. Part 3. Caesar's first glimpse of Britain. When the Roman general Julius Caesar first set foot on the shores of this land in 55 BC, he found a people unlike any he had encountered before. Caesar himself, in his commentaries of the Gallic War, described the Britons as brave beyond measure, hardened by the wildness of their land, more at home in war than in peace. To the Romans, the island of Britain was a place of mystery and danger. Its people were seen as untamed, their connection to the land deeply spiritual in ways that Roman civilization struggled to understand. In the Roman mind, Britain was the farthest reach of the known world, a wild frontier where the rules of empire held little sway. The Britons, with their fierce independence and profound relationship with nature, represented a culture far older and more mystical than the Romans could comprehend. Caesar noted that the Britons painted their bodies with woad and fought with an almost supernatural determination, a reflection of the Britons' unique identity and their resistance to external influence. The act of painting themselves with woad, a blue dye derived from a native plant, served not just a symbol of war, but also a sacred ritual to invoke the god's protection in battle. Our favorite Roman historian, Tacitus, writing a few decades later in his biography of his father-in-law Agricola, observed that the Britons had nothing that attracted the cupidity of conquerors, but their will to remain free, a determination stronger than the might of legions. So often it is said that history is written by the winners, and of course we understand what happened in Roman Britain, but even Tacitus has to seemingly admire this determination of the ancient Britons. This deep attachment to their land made them resistant to Roman conquest. Their landscapes, untouched forests, mist-covered hills, and sacred rivers were imbued with spirits and gods, and this connection gave the Britons a strength and resolve that the Romans found both alien and intimidating. Unlike the Romans, who worshipped a pantheon of gods and goddesses in grand temples, the Britons' gods were the forces of nature themselves. They did not build great stone monuments to honor their deities. Instead, they performed their rituals in the groves of trees, by the side of rivers, and atop hills, where the earth seemed to meet the heavens. For the Britons, nature was not something to be tamed or exploited. but something to be respected and revered. The Druids, the spiritual leaders of the Britons, played a crucial role in maintaining this connection to the natural world. According to Cunliffe, the Druids acted between mortal and divine, interpreting the will of the gods through the patterns of nature, the flight of birds, the rustle of leaves in sacred groves, the movement of water in holy rivers. These priests held immense power over the tribes, and it was their spiritual guidance that helped the Britons resist the cultural dominance in the Romans. In his later accounts of the Britons, Tacitus wrote, "They were a people ruled more by nature than by law, as free as the elements themselves, unfettered by the constructs of empire." Their deities, like Brigid, the goddess of fertility and spring, and Taranis, the thunder god, were tied to the cycles of the earth, the seasons, and the weather, forces beyond human control but central to life. This made the Britons' resistance not just military, but also cultural and spiritual. They fought not only to defend their homes, but to protect the spiritual sanctity of their land. The Romans may have brought with them their roads, their fortifications, and their laws, but the Britons' connection to their land could not be so easily conquered. Roman roads cut across sacred spaces, and their towns introduced a new way of life that was alien to the Britons. Yet, while the Romans built their Hadrian's Wall and their garrisons to mark the boundary of their empire, the Britons remained unconquered in their spirits. The scholar David Mattingly observes that the Roman roads that cut across Britain symbolized more than their mere transportation. They represented an attempt to impose Roman order on the untamed landscape. But to the Britons, the land was not something to be ordered or rationalized. It was alive, sacred, and full of meaning. The land itself, crisscrossed by sacred rivers like the Thames and ancient forests like the Weald, resisted being reshaped into a Roman province. Even after centuries of Roman occupation, much of Britain remained largely as it had been before: wild, natural, and deeply spiritual. The scholar Graham Webster points out that while Roman influence spread across much of the island, in the heartlands of Wales, Scotland, and Cornwall, the tribes clung to their traditional ways, in particular in religious practices overseen by the Druids. These regions remained bastions of Britain and our culture long after the Roman withdrawal, and their resistance was symbolic of their refusal to fully be assimilated into the Roman world. So the Romans may have sought to reshape the land and its people, but the spirit of the Britons endured. Their connection to their sacred landscape, to rivers, mountains, and forests that had sustained them for generations, remained unbroken. Even today, the echoes of that time can still be felt in the traditions of Wales and Scotland, in the stories and legends, and in the reverence for the natural world that still defines so much of a British identity. Caesar's glimpse of Britain was only the beginning of a long history of invasion and resistance, but the land itself remained a source of strength and spirituality for the people who call it home. The Britons, as Tacitus observed, lived with nature as their guide, more attuned to the rhythms of the earth than the law of men. And in many ways, it was this connection that made them impossible to conquer in spirit. So we've talked about before the Romans, we've talked about during the Romans, but now in this part 4, is it? I've lost count of the parts. I think it's 4 or 3. We are going to go deeper into the sacred and the supernatural, the myths of the early Britons. So to truly understand the ancient Britons, we must dive into their myths and their gods. As the great author Graham Hancock states, that our myths are the memory banks of our ancestors. The people of this island lived in a world where the supernatural was as real as the physical. They believed that their fate was intertwined with that of the land, and their gods were not distant figures in the sky, but forces that walked among them. At the heart of this spiritual world were the Druids. The Druids were more than just priests, they were judges, philosophers, and the keepers of the sacred mysteries. They were the ones who communed with the gods, performed rituals, and oversaw the festivals that marked the turning of the seasons. The Druids were believed to have the power to heal the sick, predict the future, and even control the elements. Their stronghold was Anglesey, the sacred island of the Druids, also known as mentioned as Ynys Môn. This place was revered as the spiritual center of the ancient world, where the most powerful rituals were performed, and where the boundaries between the physical and the spiritual world were at their thinnest. It was here that the Druids would gather to offer sacrifices to the gods and ask for blessings on the land. The Romans, upon their arrival, were terrified of the Druids' power. Tacitus describes how the Druids would chant and raise their arms to the heavens, invoking curses that struck fear into the hearts of even the bravest Roman centurion. Their fear was so great that when the Romans sought to conquer Anglesey, they sought to eradicate the Druids entirely. But as we know, no matter how hard they tried, the Romans could not completely erase their influence. So, of course, one of the greatest myths, and one that has inspired me greatly to make this podcast, is of course the myth of the Battle of the Dragons. It's one of the most enduring myths from this ancient time, a tale steeped in legend and mystery that would later be woven into the fabric of Welsh identity. This myth, preserved in early medieval texts and retold for generations, tells of a ferocious struggle between two mighty dragons, one red and one white, who fought beneath the earth. The red dragon, Ddraig Goch, symbolized the people of Britain, while the white dragon came to represent the invaders, often interpreted as the Saxons or other foreign enemies. Their battle shook the land itself, causing great destruction and turmoil. In the end, the red dragon triumphed, a sign that people of this land would one day be victorious over their oppressors. So the tale of two dragons has its origin in Welsh mythology, and is most famously recounted in Geoffrey of Monmouth's Historia Britanniae, the history of the kings of Britain, written around 1136 AD. In Geoffrey's telling, the dragons are discovered by King Vortigern, a semi-legendary ruler of Britain, when he attempts to build a fortress on Ynys Môn, a hill in North Wales. However, each time his builders lay the foundations, they are mysteriously swallowed by the earth. Vortigern's advisors suggest that the site is cursed and recommend that the blood of a fatherless child be used in a ritual to secure the foundation. That child is Merlin, or Myrddin Emrys, who reveals that 2 dragons, one red and one white, are trapped beneath the hill, locked in a fierce battle. Merlin prophesies that the red dragon represents the Britons, while the white dragon symbolizes the Saxons, and their conflict foretells the eventual victory of the Britons over their invaders. Geoffrey writes, "The red dragon, which represents the Britons, will defeat the white dragon, representing the Saxons, and peace will return to the land." The red dragon's victory in this myth became a powerful symbol for the Welsh people, especially during times of oppression and resistance. Over the centuries, the red dragon has been associated with Welsh independence, resilience, and the enduring spirit of the nation. As Ddraig Goch notes in Celtic culture, the red dragon represents the ancient power of the Britons and their refusal to submit to invaders. It is a symbol of the Welsh people's long and proud history of defiance, from Roman times to the Saxon invasions and later the Normans and English. And still today, our dragon flies, defiant against the Union. Our dragon will not share its place on the Union flag. It remains independent and flies alone. The story of the dragon's battle captures the essence of Welsh resistance, a theme that has persisted throughout Welsh history. The red dragon's role as a symbol of victory over oppression resonated deeply with the Welsh during the medieval period and beyond, serving as a reminder of the cultural and political struggles the Welsh people have faced, especially during the campaigns of figures like Owain Glyndwr, the last native Prince of Wales, who led, as we have spoken, a rebellion against English rule in the 15th century. Today, the red dragon is a symbol of Wales, proudly displayed on the Welsh flag. It remains a powerful emblem of national pride, linking the modern Welsh people to their mythological past. The red dragon first appeared as a heraldic symbol in the 9th century, but became more prominent during the reign of Henry VII, who was of Welsh descent and adopted the red dragon as his emblem, following his victory at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485. According to Catherine Stevens in her book Wales, the Welsh Flag and its Symbolism, she says, "The red dragon was carried into battle by Henry's soldiers as a symbol of his Welsh heritage, and it has since become one of the most enduring symbols of Wales, embodying the people's resilience, history, and identity." The red dragon also connects to the legendary figure of Cadwaladr, a Welsh king of Gwynedd, who was considered one of the last great leaders of the Britons. In Geoffrey of Monmouth's Historia, Cadwaladr's banner is said to bear the image of the red dragon, further cementing the mythological connection between the dragon and the Welsh sovereignty. Scholars have long debated the origins and significance of the Battle of the Dragons myth, seeing it as a reflection of the historical struggles between the native Britons and successive waves of invaders. According to Patrick Sims Williams in his article The Sources of the Historia Regum Britanniae, 1991, the dragons in Geoffrey's tale are not only allegorical representations of the Britons and Saxons, but also reflect older Celtic beliefs in the sacredness of the land and its power to defend itself against foreign intrusion. The idea of dragons as protectors of the land echoes through many Celtic mythological traditions, where dragons, serpents, or worms are often seen as guardians of sacred spaces. Anne Ross, a scholar of Celtic religion, has argued that the red dragon could symbolize older pre-Christian deities associated with the earth and fertility. In her work, Pagan Celtic Britain, Ross suggests that the battle between the red and white dragons is not merely a political allegory, but a symbolic representation of the eternal conflict between the forces of native sovereignty and foreign rule. A theme that resonates in many Celtic myths, where the land itself seems to rise up to protect its people. This myth has also been used in modern Welsh nationalism. During the 19th and 20th centuries, as Wales sought greater political recognition and cultural autonomy, the red dragon became a rallying symbol. Gwyn A. Williams, in his work When Was Wales? A History of the Welsh, written in 1985, he says, "The red dragon, Ddraig Goch, emerged not only as a symbol of medieval resistance, but as a modern emblem of the survival of Welsh identity through centuries of cultural and political domination." The power of the Battle of the Dragons myth lies not just in its historical or political implication, but in its ability to bridge the present and the past. The red dragon, as it appears on the Welsh flag today, is a direct link to the ancient tales that shaped Welsh identity. For many, the story of the red dragon's triumph over the white dragon continues to symbolize the hope for eventual victory over adversity, no matter how great the challenge. Even now, the Welsh refer to the dragon as a symbol of their endurance. As poet Dafydd ap Gwilym wrote in the 14th century, "The dragon of my people rises once more, fierce and unyielding, for in its fire we are reborn." This connection between myth and identity, between ancient legend and modern national consciousness, remains one of the most powerful aspects of the Red Dragon's story, and one that has truly inspired me to make this podcast, Where the Dragons Sleep. Well, I cannot believe I have been waffling on for over an hour. I have more myths and more legends to discuss, but I think I will save them for a later episode in fear of bombarding you with too much magic for one episode. I will also be going, as I've mentioned, into more detail on my Patreon as well, where I will read the stories from the ancient times and go into maybe more interpretation and understanding. But as we are way over an hour, as mentioned, I think it's time to come to our part of the podcast where we are looking at the lineage of the true Welsh king and the descendants of Owain Glyndwr. So part 5, sorry, we continue the quest for Owain Glyndwr's bloodline and where we stand today. So as we move forward in time, we return to 2024, to the modern age, and to our quest to uncover the bloodline of the last native Prince of Wales. Over the past few weeks, I've been following leads, speaking to people and piecing together fragments of history that might point us in the right direction. But where are we now in this journey? So I recognize there is a lot of work to be done here. And this episode, I've mainly been laying the foundation of the Welsh identity, and trying to trigger an idea that we are still connected to the island and where we have come from. So in the next episode, I will probably dedicate a lot more time and attention to our modern quest. So forgive me for not having as much information as I would like for this episode, but rest assured I am working on it, and I look forward to the next episode where I will be going into a much more detail. But where are we? Let me give you a rundown of where we are. So since our last episode, I've had the privilege of speaking with several people who believe they may be connected to Glyndor's lineage. One in particular was a fascinating message, came from a listener whose family believes they are descended from Glyndor's daughter, Alice. Alice is one of the more elusive figures in Welsh history. After Glyndor's rebellion was crushed, it is said that she and her descendants went into hiding, blending into the rural Welsh countryside to avoid retribution from the English. So an intriguing quest indeed. But could these family stories be more than just legend? So I've been digging into records, and while evidence is hard to come by, there are faint traces of connections between families who lived in these remote regions and the Glyndor bloodline. It's a tantalizing possibility, and one that deserves a lot further exploration. The quest continues, and you, my dear listeners, are on it with me, and only with your support may it continue. So please consider subscribing, liking, commenting, downloading, or whatever you do on podcasts to make them, supported. Each action is a step on the old dusty map towards waking the sleeping dragon. Thank you. Another intriguing theory is that Glyndor's bloodline may have crossed the pond, the Atlantic, during the great waves of Welsh immigration to the United States in the 18th and 19th centuries. Many Welsh families carried their traditions and histories with them. Some professionals believe that the descendants of Glyndor may have been among them, their heritage lost over time or deliberately hidden to protect the family. Imagine this, a descendant of Owain Glyndor living quietly in America, perhaps unaware of their extraordinary lineage. It's a theory worth pursuing, and one that I am actively doing, speaking to my fellow Americans. So I invite anyone who's listening to this with potential connections to reach out and join this quest. All the contact details will be in the information bio of this episode. So please, if you have anything or you just want to say hello, Bonada, then please do drop me an email, and it means a lot. Together, we might uncover something truly extraordinary. I've received some incredible responses from listeners about their own family histories. One listener actually wrote to me, said, "My family has long held the belief that we are connected to the Glyndor line through a marriage that happened in the early 1600s. It's a story that's been passed down, but we've never been able to prove it. Could it be true?" they ask. I don't know, let's find out. And another more, vague connection came from a historian who suggested that one of Glyndor's descendants may have fled to Ireland after the rebellion, only then to migrate to America a few generations later. While these stories are difficult to verify, they are part of the larger tapestry we are weaving together in this quest. So where do we go from here, dear listener? The road ahead is filled with questions, but also with exciting possibilities. I've been compiling a list of experts and scholars who might help us dig deeper into the history of Owain Glyndor's family. If we are to uncover the truth of his descendants, we will need their insights and expertise. So that is what I'm currently working on. But this quest is not just about historians and scholars, it's about you, the listener. That's what this episode is about, is understanding our connection to our past. And you may not be of Welsh descent, but there is still that past that needs to be uncovered. So that's what I'm trying to do, is awaken the sleeping dragon within all of you. Each one of you holds a piece of the puzzle, a fragment of the story that we are all working to uncover together. So whether you have a lead, a family legend, or simply a passion for Brythonic history, your voice and your insights are vital to this journey. This is not just my quest, it's our quest. Together, we can uncover the mysteries of the past and bring them into the present, exploring the legends, the history, and the untold stories that connect us to the ancient world. If you've ever wondered about your own family's ties to the Welsh past, if you've heard stories passed down through generations that seem to echo the tales we're exploring, I want to hear from you. Perhaps you know of a hidden connection to the legendary Glyndor, or maybe your family has long carried whispers of a royal lineage from the days when dragons soared in our stories. These connections may seem small, but they are the very threads that weave our modern understanding of history into something vibrant and alive. That's why I invite you to join our growing community of questers. At the moment, we stand at around 40, and I'm proud of every single one of you. Thank you. We are small, but we are mighty. Where we share insights, theories, and discoveries. We may be small now, but with your help, we're slowly growing into something extraordinary. Again, and sorry for the shameless plugs, but this is the only way that I can continue. By becoming a Patreon member, you can help fuel this journey and gain access to exclusive benefits. Our Patreon community offers members-only content, early access to new episodes, and a dedicated chat forum where we can all discuss the latest developments in our quests. It's a space where we can brainstorm, share our research, and collectively dive deeper into the mysteries of Welsh history and legend. So I will have different tiers for people, free tiers for the general conversation, or you just want to be updated when the new episodes are out. But of course, if you want to support, you can become a Dragon member and gain access to all those special features, including some behind-the-scenes content, extended cuts of episodes, and members-only updates on my ongoing research. And as mentioned, some juicy, meaty, dragon-inspired merch coming soon. Your support helps me continue this journey and keeps the fire of this quest burning bright. So, we're building something unique. An ever-growing community of people passionate about the history, myth, and the untold stories of an ancient island. And we want you to be a part of it. Even if Patreon isn't for you, you can still connect us through our Instagram. Of course, I'm also going to upload these onto YouTube to see if there's any reach there. Again, everything is teeny weeny tiny at the moment, so every little like, click, share really supports me. Thank you so much. And so the Instagram is at where dragons sleep, so you can stay in the loop of what I'm doing and what I'm up to. And I also like to share sort of Welsh or British inspired images, so you might appreciate that. Every like, follow, and message helps expand our reach and brings new voices into this growing community. It's our own modern-day version of gathering around the fire to share stories of the past and dream of what we can uncover together in the future. So whether it's through Patreon, Instagram, YouTube, or just by listening and spreading the word, your involvement in this quest is invaluable. Together, we are piecing together the past, one story, one legend, one connection at a time. And who knows, perhaps it will be your story that unlocks the next great discovery. And that's it for today. I cannot believe how long I have talked for. And if you've come this far, thank you so much. As with all great quests, there are more mysteries ahead. Could we be close to uncovering the true bloodline? Could the descendants of Wales's last dragon still walk among us? The journey is far from over, and each step brings us closer to the truth. So, my lovely listeners, until next time, stay curious and remember, the answers we seek may lie in the stories we have yet to uncover. Thank you.
Verity min medar jytot robin, verity min medar dibyn os dobin, verity min medar John, verity min medar never beyond. Minti ar cor medar jytot robin, minti ar cor medar dibyn os dobin, minti ar cor medar John, minti ar cor medar never beyond. Benedi yno medar jytot robin, benedi yno medar dibyn os dobin, benedi yno medar John, benedi yno medar never beyond. Helar driw bach medar jytot robin, helar driw bach medar dibyn os dobin, helar driw bach medar John, helar driw bach medar never beyond. Benedi yno medar jytot robin, benedi yno medar dibyn os dobin, benedi yno medar John, benedi yno medar never beyond. Father drew back medar jytot robin, Father drew back medar dibyn os dobin, Father drew back medar John, Father drew back medar never beyond. I heb rungig a tremada dibyn os dobin, I heb rungig a tremada John, I heb rungig a tremada never beyond. Cafil a chert medar jytot robin, cafil a chert medar dibyn os dobin, cafil a chert medar John, cafil a chert medar never beyond.
So, thank you again for joining me on this episode of Where Dragons Sleep, a Welsh Quest. This podcast is written, produced, and edited by me, Hunter W. Jones, as part of our collective journey into the mysteries and stories of Wales. Special thanks to the musicians who bring these ancient tales to life. Today's haunting opening and what we've just listened to, Hela Dlu, or Hunting the Wren, was performed by the Welsh folk band Fern Hill, featuring Julie Murphy, Andy Cutting, Kerry Rees-Matthews, and Jonathan Shawland from the compilation The Fairy Dance, Myth and Magic in Celtic Songs and Tunes, courtesy of Beautiful Joe Records. So please YouTube them, check it out, because it is just a wonderful compilation. I'd also like to acknowledge the scholars and writers who help illuminate these stories and histories. My old mate Tacitus, of course, Geoffrey of Monmouth, but of course Anne Rossett, Barry Cunliffe was also mentioned, but their insights ground our journey through myth and mystery. So if you enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting again the Patreon. Your support helps us bring these stories to life, giving you access to exclusive content, early episodes, and a growing chat community. You can also follow us on Instagram at Where Dragons Sleep to stay up to date on our latest episodes and join discussions with fellow questers. This is a Two Wolves collective production. My email to get in contact will be written below, but just in case, it's 2.wolves.digital@gmail.com. So this has been Where Dragons Sleep. Until next time, diolch yn fawr, thank you. May the echoes of Cymru's ancient tales guide you as we continue to uncover the mysteries of the Forgotten Isle together. Thank you. Goodbye.